I'm Elisa Wyatt of Pilatesology. Welcome, everyone, to Pilatesology Book Club. Today, again, we're discussing Joe Pilates' return to life with the exercises and all the fun stuff. So that's going to be a great conversation. And I would just like to say thank you to Cheryl Chernquist, and there she is. And I'm going to turn things over to Cheryl to talk about housekeeping as I continue to let folks in. We have, I'll start off one more thing. I have two special guests here with us today, Katherine Nash and Sanjay Mayo. Mayo, I'm sorry, Sanjay, I always mispronounce your last name. Both are teachers for Pilatesology, and they have done quite a bit of study, or at least Kathy has, into return to life and the exercises that go into it. So they're both here to share on that. And Sanjay had experience with Joseph Pilates personally. So we have fun things to talk about. So Cheryl, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks. So welcome everybody to our Pilatesology book club. Thank you so much for attending. And we really appreciate you taking the time out on a Friday afternoon to come out and join with us, spend some time with us. So this is a free meeting for all Pilates and movement enthusiasts. It's sponsored by Pilatesology in partnership with Prospire app, the Province Pilates Center, which is my studio, and Authentic Method Pilates, which is a studio owned by Vivian Picon-Jung in New York City. We hope you'll find some fresh inspiration for your workouts, some rest and relaxation while reading, and fun connecting with our community. This is, our fifth or sixth or maybe sixth one. And we have the year of 2022 planned out ahead. So you'll get to see all the rest of the books that we're excited to share with you. So my name is Cheryl Chernquist. I own the Province Pilates Center. I'm a teacher trainer for Power Pilates. I've been teaching Pilates since 1999. And I'm here in Rhode Island. And I started this book club early in COVID as a way, I guess, to start with my team to kind of come together and do something fun. And then I met Nabi and Vivian, and we grew from there. Nabi is the owner and developer of the Prospire app, which is an app for your iPhone that helps students, teachers manage students. It allows you to keep track of workouts, to take notes on where your student is at, to send and share photo or video of the progress or homework for your students. And if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to Nabi, who's also on this call, and she'd be happy to share what her app is all about and how to use it. And then Vivian Picon-Jung is actually related to Nabi, and she owns a studio in New York, and they started coming to my book club as we met during COVID. We've never actually physically met, and it kind of blossomed from there. So thank you, Elisa, for helping share our book club with a greater community. Just so you know, this is being recorded, and it will be up on the Pilatesology website once it becomes edited through, so you can watch it again and again if you'd like. And also, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you could be on mute during the discussion, it just helps from a background noise standpoint. But please feel free to either use the raise your hand emoji or icon, which is on your Zoom platform in the reactions section. Or you could, if you raise your hand, you're a little over 25 though, so I'd have to go to another screen. So if you do this one, I might see you, I might not. So probably best idea is to bring yourself up in the queue with the emoji. And also keep a free running chat going at all times. We're moderating the chat and monitoring it so that we can bring up any questions. Okay, so that being said, I'm super excited to be here and to have Kathy and Sanjay and Elisa and everybody participate. Elisa, is there anything else you wanted to start with before we kind of delve in? No. Okay. So I feel like a lot of times in book club here, I've been able to interview an author, and obviously here we don't have the chance to do that. Elisa did write in the chat, please feel free to start with any questions or topics that you would like to start with. But I think a topic that, that we put out in the book club invite or prior, some things to think about. And one of the things that we put out to start to think about was the specific exercises that are in the return to life and how they're taught and directed instructions in the return to life, and how maybe they might be taught or have changed or evolved now to be what you may do slightly differently, and maybe why. Is there a reason? What do we know about that? So I don't know if Kathy or Sanjay have any thoughts about coming from the return to life. Kathy, would you like to start for us?
Sure. Ironically, when this came up, I've actually been working on a project where I've been comparing return to life and, because I trained with Ramana and Jay and Lolita and, Shari and blah, blah, blah. So I've actually been interviewing Lolita and reading Return to Life and comparing it to my notes for my training and discussing, and with Blossom on Kathy, because I was with Kathy Grant as well. So, there are a lot of changes in the work. And what we have come up with is that when the dancers came in, they didn't need all the flexibility. Whereas if you look at Return to Life, a lot of the things are as far as you can stretch, open your legs as wide as possible. Whereas with the dancers, they didn't need to do that. They needed to stabilize and control and be within their joint. One of the biggest things is the leg circle, because the leg circle in Return to Life, which is so fascinating to me, is not only taught where you let the hip go as you go across, you let the opposite hip go as you open. And Ramana used to always say, and Kathy Grant used to say, and even Lolita says, always cross the body. And yet, when we do our leg circles, because we did it with a stable pelvis, we began from the top each time. But if you read Return to Life, it actually begins at the top and then begins crossing at the bottom to start the next circle.
Oh, okay.
And if you follow corkscrew, it threads your leg circle, which we know threads to your corkscrew, the hip position and the angle of the leg. If you follow the way Joseph Pilates does it, his leg circle, it literally is the points of your corkscrew. Get, where your hip goes off here, your hip goes off here. So if you follow I just found this so fascinating. If you follow his words and you actually do it the way it's written in the book, you bring it up and you have your leg join you and you reach it across and you have your leg join you and you go down, you have your leg join you, and all the points that he talks about, you are actually doing a single leg corkscrew. So these are things that blew my mind.
I love that thought too about if you have the dancers that have the flexibility already and you have to rein that in, it would look obviously different than what he's sharing here for his body, right?
Right.
Clearly, yeah. Sanjay, did you have any thoughts?
Not all the way open.
Way out. Sanjay, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I have to second Kathy completely on that, because, when you think of it, when was this book published? 1945. That's the year I was born. So people in 1945 were very stiff. I mean, what did they do? They walked. They might have done a little bit of lame tennis. They might have done a little bit of ballroom dancing. But everybody was generally very stiff. He was faced with these people, and all he wanted to do is move. So consequently, he went way out of the ranges just to get them going, just like get those limbs going, find the range. That's what his philosophy was. And as Kathy says, when the dancers came in with our legs around our tonsils, the whole thing changed. He took one look and he went, wait a minute. Now we're going to work for stability. And to get to the one leg circle, I do remember Joe telling me this, and I've never forgotten it. He said, imagine the leg that's out on the mat is your standing leg as a dancer. Now move that other leg and keep that pelvis so stable. Think that you are on point or standing there and that could not move. And that just did describe the whole exercise compared to the one in the book, when he just wanted people to find ranges and move. You must remember, if we look at joint ranges, in those days, those people stayed in the mid-joint range. They never went to the outer or the inner ranges. They just stayed in that comfortable, what I would call normal daily routine range. So that explains the big changes that we see that have developed.
Right. I wonder if sitting and, after teaching on Zoom too much for the past year and a half, I can't help but wonder if we go, everything kind of goes in that pendulum swing. If we go back full circle to needing that flexibility again, because we're sitting way more than we would have, earlier on before all of this, let's say. It's interesting, that kind of thought to think about. Awesome. Does anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share on that topic? Elisa?
I just wrote this in the chat, but I was wondering, obviously we can't know, but I wonder if Joe was showing the workout that he did for himself. Clearly he was a man and had muscles that looked like what I would suspect were, a body that was tight. And it just made me, like, looking at the pictures, it made me wonder, is this Joe's workout that we're seeing? And maybe he wasn't really thinking in that moment, like, oh, this has to apply to the full range of bodies. It was more like, I'm just going to show the, workout I do. I don't know. I guess we can't know, right?
Right. I'm always intrigued by go ahead, Sanjay.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, people who are muscle bound, just think of spine stretch forward. They can't go very far. But Joe did go far. Mm-hmm. So consequently, he had flexibility and strength. But
yes.
So a stiff man, you're going to let them go as far as they can, and they're probably not even going to get half the range. But of course, if you tell a flexible person to go as far as they want, they'll just flop down. So think of that.
It's true. And, it brings up for me too, the Turnverein movement. I know I'm saying that incorrectly, but that was the German fitness movement that Joe's father was a member of a club in Germany, and he was definitely exposed to the club. And there was all kinds of exercises that looked just like Pilates. And in fact, I think in the email that we sent out about this book club, I included a link to a blog post of ours where one of our friends did a bunch of research about this movement, and she had all kinds of pictures and things. So you can find that on our blog. But I also wanted to show you guys this book. It's called How to Be Fit by Robert Kiphuth. You can see it. This book was published in 1942, so 3 years before Joe. And this is all like the type of movement, I guess in terms of exercises that were going on at that time. This guy was a swim coach, but a lot of these exercises look just like Pilates. Like, I'll show you rolling like a ball right now. It's pretty amazing. So it's interesting to just wonder how much Joe's background in with his father and as a child in the Turnverein time influenced what he ended up teaching. And then, of course, that developed over time as he worked with more and more people and more bodies. And I would think, too, that the Turnverein movement, I saw definitely lots of pictures of women, but it seemed as though it was more men than women, just in my exposure to it.
Lisa, if I could say, we have to remember when this book was written, what the vernacular of the time is. And we tend to forget that. At the time, a gymnasium was like a gymnastics room. It wasn't like our perception of a gymnasium. You have to look at what that time was. They had Swedish bars. They had mats to tumble on. That was their physical fitness. So what he was teaching was not really out of the scope of, when they talk about him in martial arts, the martial arts at that time was the police academy. It was martial hand to foot. It wasn't like we think Taekwondo. Yes, he boxed and he head wrestled. But when we look at martial arts, when we hear that, when we read that, we have to remember of the time that Joe was developing this and not look at it from our vantage point, but look at it from where and who he was. And like Sanjay said, at that time what people's activity levels were. And it wasn't women at the gym. Women weren't at the gym. They were, at home, vacuuming, I don't know, whatever, dusting the bins. It was the men at the gym, and the men were tight. And this exercise reflects it. And the other thing that I really wanted to stress was, this is just his home book to get people started. It's not a Bible. People treat it like it's a Bible, and it's not a Bible, because as Sanjay said, the dancers came in and they were all over, and Joe taught who was in front of him, which is why Carola's work is different than Kathy's work, is different than Ramana's work, might be different from what Sanjay learned or Jay learned, or Lolita learned, because they were taught for their body. Everybody here teaches hip circles, right? It's not in the book. It's not in the book. It's hip twist. So we have to remember that this work is not black and white, even though it has rules and regulations. The beauty of Joe was with those beautiful teachers that he's had, and the people who've had the good fortune to have trained with him and met him will tell you, he taught the body in front of him, and we have to remember that when we are looking at this book.
Kim had a question. Kim, do you want to come on and ask? I know she was here. I saw her a minute ago. Go ahead, Kim. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm wanting to know more accurately the history of the Abdominal 5 series, and how, here it is in the book, we only see the first 2. And, as Kathy is saying, this is not a full representation of all of the exercises, but is there someone who can speak to, I heard that it was Ramana that had made up the last 3, and was it for the dancers? And if so, the dancers certainly didn't need to stretch their hamstrings. I'm just curious about how those last 3 came to being.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, so I actually spoke to Lolita asking her about this too, because, by the way, is that a Boston Terrier? That's my original breed. I grew up with them. I'm like, oh my God, so beautiful. Oh, they're like the funniest little dogs. They're the best. Sorry, puppies. So Ramana added the series of 5 because at that time, remember we talk about times changing, she felt people needed more abdominal work. And I clarified this with Lolita. Sanjay was there. It was not taught to her. But you do see all the exercises elsewhere. So if you go to the leg springs, you see it in the leg springs. You see it in the leg circles with the legs going straight, lowering, and lift, right? You see, elements of your crisscross all throughout the method, right? So you see it in there. It was just that she put it there. There were times with Rana that we would do leg springs without leg springs, because your goal was to do leg springs without leg springs and bottoms off without leg springs. So I feel like that got developed there. And both Lolita and Kathy did add those exercises in, but not after where they are in Ramana's program. They put it after the teaser. And Kathy would do a scissor, and she'd do a bicycle as well.
Interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Let's move ahead to the second topic, so to speak, was about breathing and how we see the breath and breathing described in his book versus what I feel like is a plethora of different styles of breathing being taught in many different ways currently. So I don't know if anyone has any, maybe Sanjay, do you have any thoughts on the breathing aspect of what you know from what you've done, and how or why it's evolved to some different things that.
Well, you know that Joe had emphysema. He developed emphysema. I think it was due to his cigar smoking. He had that barrel chest. It was fixed in the position of inspiration, because when you have emphysema, you break down, the alveoli are all broken down and you cannot get rid of air. You cannot get rid of air. So consequently, I think throughout his life, I don't know when his emphysema started. I know that story that he was asthmatic when he was young is not true. Apparently that is not correct. That is kind of, I don't know how that got in there, because this book by Eva Rinke is very clear about that. So I don't know when he started having trouble with his breathing, because he must have realized that he can't get rid of air. So the expiration became such a huge thing for him. To force the expiration, the explanation for that is that when you breathe in, the bronchus gets narrow. And when you breathe out, the bronchus widens. So you get rid of the spasm. So you had to breathe out to open the bronchus. Otherwise, you couldn't get any air in. So he must have either known that either just through his own experience or possibly studied it. But expiration was his big thing. And of course, he forced it out through his mouth, because he could get more force out. Now, I do know that if you force out air through your nostrils, it's actually better because you have more resistance. But perhaps for him, that was too hard, because I do know it was in through your nose and out through your mouth. But possibly because it was too hard for him. Then we look at Fletcher with his forced expiration, percussive breathing, yes. Now, he was an asthmatic. So it seems to me that this develops with people. Now that we've read about that wonderful book, Breath, now I'm teaching everybody to breathe in and out through their noses. So, you know what? You move with the times. You learn. That's what's so beautiful.
You know, Sanjay, Ramana only taught in through the nose, out through the mouth, out through the nose.
Oh, really?
She was very specific that that's what she was taught by Joe.
Oh no.
So, even though scientifically, I've been doing a lot of research on, we all get on. Yes, go ahead, Elisa.
The saying that Ramana used to me was, noses are for breathing and mouths are for kissing. To tell you stop using your mouth for breathing, breathe through your nose. Yeah, that was, she didn't say that Joe told me that, but that was what she would tell me if she caught me breathing through my mouth.
Yeah, no, she insisted with me that was the way it was taught, and that was the way. And, if you look at breath, what's very interesting with Joe's work is that it's the inhalation and the exhalation are both controlled. And when humans breathe, we actively inhale and passively exhale unless we are in exercise. And understanding that exhalation is now being activated where it's normally passive has a whole different response to the nervous system. And when you study a lot of breath, you learn that breathing through your nose actually stimulates the vagus nerve, which is a calming, de-stressing, and breathing through your mouth, which at times of certain stress you want, increases cortisol. So it made perfect sense that, when Ramana would say the mouth is for kissing, the nose is for breathing, that, you remember to always breathe through your nose for the de-stressing element.
Actually, I must just add, now that you say that, Joe didn't open his mouth to breathe out. It wasn't like opening your mouth and forcing it out, but it was through pursed lips. And I think that was him. I think that was just him. It was like, I definitely remember seeing that when he was breathing. But I, as Kathy says, possibly, people change things to suit their bodies at the time. Remember, I got Joe when he was in his 80s. So by then his breathing was probably quite labored. So it could be that too. He might have started off breathing in and out through his nose, and I just didn't know about that.
Whenever we start talking about breath, I find myself paying attention to it when I'm sitting here. Like, now I'm breathing different.
I know, so true. I just looked, and he doesn't mention. He talks about the breath in Return to Life, but he doesn't talk about what to breathe through. It's not something he goes into. Yeah, and likely for all of us, it's changed over time, hasn't it? I know there was a time where I practiced breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, or I tried the Fletcher breath or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. It's such a endless topic.
There's a few points in the chat that was Kim mentioned. It's interesting to me that in Return to Life, the inhale tends to be more on the most difficult part of the exercise, where in more modern times, and I think of like personal training, weight training, the exhalation is usually at the difficult part of the exercise. So that was one thought. And Andrea had written, the book presents still photos of Joe in each section of the exercises, but with our breath, I teach the in-between within the exercises, which creates length and strength. Nasal breathing is a long learning process. Yes, I agree with that, especially if you have any sinus stuff. Nasal breathing can be challenging, right? I wanted to go back for a second. Vivian had mentioned that maybe Joe wanted to publish this book to get his work out there, to also compete with the other experts, because Elisa had talked about this other book in 1942, I think she said, which I never heard of that book. But you're right. If there's other people out there that are presenting and experts in the field, he wanted to be one also, right? So that's a great thought, Vivian, that, it's a way to get yourself out there. I do want to ask this question by Christina. She asked, how did Joseph come up with the hundreds? Does anyone know the origin of the 100? And everyone knows the benefits, but how about Joe? Kathy or Sanjay, do you know where that might have originated or why? No.
If you read his goal of the exercise, it was supposed to stimulate your circulation, stimulate your heartbeat, wake you up, get you ready for the workout. So maybe was his way. Also, remember, it's quite advanced coordination to breathe and beat and do everything together. So, all I can think is that it was his way of starting off like with a bang, get everybody alert, concentrate, breathe, get the blood flowing, and kind of get you ready for the workout. That's all I can say.
Yeah, like get your intention, set the intention. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kathy, can you speak? Go ahead.
Yes,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Kathy.
Romana used to get upset if people came in and started warming up before their workout. She would get upset. She would say, the 100 is the perfect warm up. And so if you look at the 100, what is it doing? You're pumping your arms, right? When you pump your arms and your abdominal is tight, where is your circulation going to go? It's going to start going into your heart, right? So it's the beginning of with your breath and the vigorous pumping, you are getting the circulation moving, preparing for the detoxification of the body. We have to remember that Pilates work is not just exercise. It is a systematic method that was created to detoxify the body the way that the exercises layer in the order in which they're taught and how they increase. So this is the very beginning of the work. You're getting your heart, your body warm. You're getting your heart pumping. You're taking the blood out of other areas, and you're really getting it going into the lungs. And we talked about the importance of, the lungs and getting the air in the lungs. And the only way to do that is with a full inhalation and a full exhalation, and to bring the circulation rapidly into that area.
Kathy, can you speak a little bit about you made a comment in the chat about the rest between the exercises and that there was never a rest in the studio. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That's another thing in Return to Life. If you look how many of the times in the beginning, he says, you lie back down. You go to that start position. You go to that start position. And if you think of this, and also if you really look at Return to Life, it's like perfect this exercise before you go on to the next. It doesn't say, and that's the way Ramana taught. Ramana would be like, you have to learn these first 5 exercises before you add exercises. You don't just do a crappy mat and build bad behavior. And Joe says this in the book, do it as I prescribe it. I feel that the rest was in there because, as you know, those of us who trained, and Sanjay maybe can clarify, when she trained, there was no rest. You literally went from one exercise to the next, and when Ramana moved to Dragos, she added that pick up your bottom and move because of the space and the walls behind. But when I was at the old studio and you were on the mat, you didn't. You just went right into your double leg from there, your series from there. So there was never a stop. So I feel that since this was a home book intended for people that did not work out, and the rests in the very beginning were in there so that they could gather their senses.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I also find it's so interesting that the exercises are really challenging. I mean, to go to buy a book and do these exercises they're advanced. A lot of them are what we might deem advanced exercises. So it would be hard, I think, for a layperson to come off and just open the book and study the book and do that and do it well or do it properly. I don't know if you have thoughts on the level of it.
We actually said that to Ramana once, and we got a little scolded because she said that there was a person that had never done Pilates, had only had Joe's book, and came into the studio and did great work. I was like, well, then we're all out of business.
I'm looking through some of the chat was about the books that Sanjay had mentioned, and I thank you, Elisa, for answering in the chat. One was Breath by James Nestor, and the other was the biography of Joe Pilates by Eva Rinke. And Elisa mentioned in the Pilatesology website under the book club, you can see the interviews with those 2 authors. So we already had them on our book club, so they're there. Okay.
Cheryl, there's also a really good podcast out by Jack Feldman called Breathing.
Okay.
I'll put it in
What's the last name again? Yeah, that'd be great.
Jack Feldman, Breathing for Mental and Physical Health.
Okay. It's a podcast. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Mental and physical health. Okay. Well, I know we can all agree upon the fact that for physical performance, okay.
For performance.
Breath is important, and we can all at least agree on that. There's so many things, like you said, we could take a whole hour plus talking about that. Another point that had come up in the email was about Joe's emphasis on balance in the body and mind and what is achieved through Pilates. I don't know if anybody wants to speak into that. Obviously, we all know the benefits of Pilates and body-mind balance and body-mind connection. But Sanjay, working with him, do you feel like that was something that came up in your daily sessions, or how did you experience that?
Well, let me just tell you something. If Joe told you something one week and you came back the next week and you didn't apply yourself, you might be kicked out, okay? He was very strict. What he told you, you retained. What he told you, you applied. From exercise to exercise, which means you were totally engaged all the time. There was no chatting. There was no looking around. And he was so strict, in fact, that a few people that I thought looked all right, but because they weren't concentrating, he would just say, I can't teach you. Clara, take them. He was very impatient, impatient, You had to apply yourself. And it doesn't matter if you didn't get it right, but he needed to see that you were really connecting the dots. And in fact, very often, if you didn't do something correctly, he'd go, now, think this through. I mean, this was not a discussion. It was quick. Keep doing it. Now, think this through. What are you doing wrong? Okay, he would make you find it. He was, honestly, if I talk about you left there, not physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. First of all, in trying to please him, that was very important. And then you try and get it as best as you could, to the best of your ability. Leave there exhausted. Know when you came back the following week, you better come in with your bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, because he was not going to take anything that, forgot this, can't do that. So that's my experience with him, yes. He seemed to just never lose concentration.
Vivian wrote, think this. I do love that. Think this through. Kathy, go ahead. You wrote in chapter 6 in your health.
In his book in chapter 6, he discusses the importance of a balanced body for a balanced mind, and that these are interwoven. We always discuss it, mind and body, but it's not. Your brain cell is the same as your big toe cell. It's just you. And at the same time that Joe was developing this, Moshe Feldenkrais was developing his work as well. And the both of them understood the importance of somatics and the physical and the emotional connection. So if you have an imbalanced body, there is always, so think about it. If you have somebody and they're standing and their back is arched, right? And they have tension, are they going to be happy people? No, because their body is always fighting in pain. If you have somebody who's balanced front to back, standing easily on their own muscles without stress, without tension, they're going to have much more ease of mind because the body isn't fighting anything. So when we understand that it's not divided, that mind and body aren't separate, when you balance the body, you balance the mind. You guys know I show dogs, right? If I have a dog that is tense or is showing tension, I pick up a leg. Why? When I pick up a leg, the dog has to balance itself. To balance itself, it has to settle. And that comes to, there's so many of Joe's exercises where you're moving across the floor, where you're balancing, all those more advanced exercises where you're balancing that are so important, but we leave them out. But they are very, very important to make complete balance of you.
I love that thought. It's especially when you put it in that I never would have thought about it from an animal perspective, but working those, if possible, those balance exercises on the reformer in, more advanced way. So makes sense. Elisa, Andrea wrote, in regards to Sanjay's point about Joe being really impatient and the way his style of teaching, Andrea wrote, it sounds like many choreographers and ballet masters that she worked with over the years. And Elisa, I love this point. Go ahead, Elisa, you can say it. I thought this was great.
We can't hear you.
There we go. I'm sorry. It just takes a second for this to move right now. I was appreciating Sanjay's point that she was making. And it seemed as though in Joe's studio, it was really expected that you showed up and paid attention and really took personal responsibility for your body and your workout, which I feel like is exactly the opposite of often what clients show up feeling about Pilates. They're sort of like, Jay Grimes would always say it to me, they just come in and they want you to do it to them. Do it for me is the attitude often, like make me so much better. And it's like, well, actually the only person who can do that is you yourself. And it just seemed like a different attitude then.
I think even the questioning sometimes of what you're asking them to do, like, can you imagine arguing with Joe if he told you to do something? Look at Sanjay, and like having a debate about it. Why? If you're paying him to be your teacher and you're going there with the intent to learn what he has to offer you, why would you question that? I guess it's one thing to have a curiosity about it, but then to debate about it is something else.
Yeah. That's so true. And in some of I don't think that he was adverse to telling you things. Obviously, Sanjay, you had lots of experience with him teaching you very specific things about your body. And you can see, especially in the photos that Chuck Rappaport took for Sports Illustrated magazine, there are a lot of pictures in his proof sheets of Joe showing someone like gesturing towards his arm or showing them something. And I don't think that he was adverse to really digging in with you if he felt like you were going to apply it. Yeah.
Kathy, you had a good point right there. Would you like to share what you just thought?
Yeah. So it's the way that studios are run today. And, when I first went to the first studio with Romana, it wasn't like it was today. You had your first lesson. She gave you these dittoed sheets. You had to make sure you did them and knew your work. You would come in, you do your workout for whatever equipment was free. You'd start there. They'd add an exercise. It'd be like, do this person over, do what this person's doing. And, there was a lot of independent thought and self-responsibility. But when we started teaching with the certifications, people were used to one-on-ones. It was the rage and they wanted the personal attention. And, so Pilates became that because it was what the demand was at the time and still sort of is, it probably would be more so a little bit after COVID. But I just wanted to hearken on what Sanjay said, if you don't mind, about Joe and bring it to respect, because that's another thing that has changed. You have these great teachers, and and I'm sure Andrea, like as a dancer, you would never walk in, not be dressed correctly, not be prepared. You would not talk to your team. Exactly. You were the vessel. And that was, people, when they saw me do Romana's videos, they thought, oh, we thought you were a very serious person. I'm like, no, that was my job. I was the body, there's nothing. We lack that. Students lack that respect. And I kind of blame it on us because it's our responsibility to demand that excellence at the risk of maybe not being liked or maybe not having your studio full. But if we are going to bring the bar up to where Joe wanted it, we have to be tougher. And we have to demand that excellence and that respect in our studios.
Right. Whistler Pilates wrote, I wonder if it is the way studios are run, or is it the clients and their expectations of value for dollar? The 50s and 60s was, and prior was, all about respect, and certainly no mobile phones. Yeah, right? One went off at my studio today. It's a chronic problem, even when you put up signs and ask them to shut them off, right? It's unbelievable. I do think it's changed. So much has changed society, from a societal standpoint, with the advent of technology and everything that goes along with it. And I was reading a mini excerpt about patience and persistence in the edition that I have on page 29. It talks about, he wrote, Rome was not built in a day, and that patience and persistence are vital qualities in the ultimate successful accomplishment of any worthwhile endeavor. And I feel like patience and persistence is so lost in so much these days. And nobody wants to have the persistence to see the results or the patience to get there, it seems. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that, but that came up.
Well, we are in a society of instant gratification, huh? You realize that. I mean, no one wants to work through the stuff and find it themselves. They want it on a plate. But as Kathy says, you can change that. It's the way you teach. I mean, I say very little. I wait until they found it. And then I say, now, imprint that in your mind, because I'm not going to tell you again. Now, people say I'm hard. I'm not shouting at them, but I'm not going to spoon feed anybody. It's too exhausting. You don't want to work, you can go somewhere else. That's it. I always say to them, you're paying me, I'm not going to spoon feed you. You are going to be doing the work. And it's not being unkind and not being impatient. It's just that you want that person to know this is a journey together. I'm not going to do it for you. So I'm not popular, but that's okay.
But Sanjay, but you also expect them to do it.
Yes.
I feel like, what I always find interesting, we have so many, Elisa, how many workout videos do you have on Pilatesology?
Oh, there's probably about 1,700 at this point.
Okay. So there's workouts everywhere. I always find it very interesting that if I'm teaching a workshop where people are going to be sitting and, well, when you come to the ranch, you never sit, but are going to be sitting and watching a workshop, it fills up like that. Workouts, people don't want to do. And it's within you forcing yourself to do the hard things, to do the hard workouts, to push your envelope. That's where your change comes in. And when your change comes in, then you ask that of your clients. You ask that of your students, because if you expect that excellence of yourself, you're going to expect the same from them. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to expect that of ourselves if we want it from them as well. Mm-hmm. I might not be popular for that statement.
I 100% agree. Vivian, you had your hand up. Are you there?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I don't have my video on because I'm sitting in the car.
That's okay.
But
that's okay.
Kathy, like exactly what you said, like as myself, I'm not a hugely experienced teacher, but I remember from when I first got certified from a program that was not really, really serving the teachers. I went out to start teaching, and I would not even have the confidence to tell my student, oh, you've got to know this and, come in the next day, because like, quite frankly, I think a lot of teachers who come out and start teaching, the deepness of their knowledge is not enough for them to even have that confidence.
Yes. I agree, Vivian. 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I always believed that the certification should be only up to what I call core level or intermediate level, because I think when you're in these programs, people are so worried about getting to the advanced that they don't really force themselves to get that core work down and get it in their body, because they're like, oh God, I have to do control balance off. Whereas they really focus those training years on that. And then the next 5 years of their continued education focused on the advanced work and pushing their bodies that way. I think it'd be that people would be a lot better and more confident teachers, and then expect something realistic of themselves and of their teachers, and then progress forward at a healthy pace.
That's a great point.
Yes, look, who is the majority in a studio? It is the beginners and intermediate.
Yes.
I mean, how many advanced people do most studios have? Not many. So it's kind of pointless, as Kathy says, rushing this training, that you get it all under your belt and then you actually miss the essence of the whole method.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I also think that they should stop at that intermediate level. Then you go and do your time. Then you come back and you do the final thing if you want. Yes. I think that's how it should be done.
But it also, that gives, if we do it that way, like the first year you come back and you learn your advanced mat exercises. And then the next year you come back and you learn your advanced this, and then you learn your advanced that, and then finally your advanced reformer. The other thing it does is it not only gives teachers digestible amounts to learn, it also keeps them involved. And I think that sometimes what we do is we run from teacher to teacher to teacher instead of finding your person, focusing on that, getting to know the work in your body, and then going to other teachers when you actually know you actually have a thought. Yes. And you have a thought process.
Those are such great points. Whistler Pilates also wrote, I believe Kathy and Sanjay are correct in that as we as teachers develop our skills and confidence, we start to eliminate our tolerance and raise the bar and expectations for our clients to own their workout, and the commitment of the client being regular with this, also with a relationship at such a positive rate. That's a win-win for everybody. So I agree with that.
Well said. Well said.
Yes. Elisa, did you want to ask your question that you typed in?
So I was just wanting to hear everyone's thoughts on whether it is a valuable exercise to, for example, go through Return to Life and practice the mat exercises the way he describes them. I do know Jay Grimes, for example, calls going through Joe's archives in search of Joe's original work, going through Joe's trash. He doesn't see value in that. I wonder if anybody else has any feelings about that.
I mean, personally, I think that going through the way archives is kind of going to the trash, because he left it here. You know, it's not like he taught this method with the pieces of equipment that he stayed with for 30 years. It was pretty, right? So 30 years, he was like, here's my method. Yes, I might teach it this for this person. I might teach it this for this person. And it might be interesting to look at the process, but I just keep looking, and it's like more gadgets, more this, more that. And it makes me think about, when we look at all these archival things, that it's just confusing people, because it's like, you know, you get those cameras, right? The new SLR cameras, and like they do everything. They even wash the dog if you need them to, right? But all we really need to do is be able to take a good picture and maybe use 3 or 4 settings well, right? So until you can use those 3 or 4 settings well, it's just confusing to go back and look at all that stuff, except for what he presented himself, what he had up on his walls. You know, for instance, the photos that he had them there for a reason. He wanted you to see that, you know, when you were in the front splits on the reformer, that you could have the bar down if you're tall, you could have a foot turned out, you could have a foot parallel, you could have a heel up, you could have it at 45. You look at what he wanted you to see and go from there. I mean, that's just my opinion. There's so much just in this, what we have, that's, you know.
Kathy, you made me, something you just said made me wonder, because I haven't looked at them in a while, but in those pictures that Joe had on the rolly things in his studio, were there variations within those exercises, like heel down, heel up, bar down, bar up?
There weren't in those, but he had those photos up in the studio, just like Ramona had photos up in the studio. And so those, those were the ones where there were variations in that. Okay. So, you know, we're looking at Joe's reformer that he worked on, and you compare it to, you know, what do you have? One with like 70 springs? You know, there was one that had like a zillion springs on it, but he settled on 4 springs. He settled on a magic circle. He settled on the toe corrector. He settled, like, there were very specific things, you know. In Ramona's studio, she had the 2 Cadillacs that didn't have the slide bar that went up and down, but there was also a guillotine, which was a huge part. And that had all the different heights, you know. So I don't know. I feel like in his studio, there is so much that we can learn and build off of. Listen, I've been doing this, 40 something years. And since I began my first Pilates lesson, and I still don't feel like I have scratched
the surface
of the magnitude of just what I've been taught, and the variations I've been taught, and the breakdown that I've been taught, as to, you know, to go back and, you know, look and see well, Joe had, a reformer with 20 springs. Maybe I should maybe I should put 20 springs in my reformer. It's kind of going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you for saying that, Kathy, too, because I think it's true. Like almost the more you do it, the less you feel like sometimes,
yes.
And that's refreshing to know that we're not the only one feeling that way.
Oh my God. Like I'm telling you,
sorry, just add something to that. The method is the method and we have the basis, but it depends on the body in front of you, the proportions, the ability, the problems. And that's where all those little nuances come in. And that's what makes you a good teacher. Dolly Dinkle's never going to look like Mary Jo. They've got different bodies. They have different everything. So that's what you have to do. You have to adjust for all those that you get the best out of them. There's the answer.
But you can't know how to adjust, Sanjay, unless you know the base, unless you know that math.
Exactly. You've got to know the straight and narrow. You have to know the straight and narrow. You can't do anything if you don't understand that first, which is basically the goal of the exercise. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's why we were told the first 5 years, don't teach injuries, don't teach issues, teach a healthy body.
Yes.
When we evaluate a litter, we evaluate the whole litter. And then we begin with the worst puppy and we end with the best puppy, so that what is burned in our mind is what the goal is. And so as we work, we want to understand what our goal is. We don't want to burn in our mind and get caught what the least is. So you want to know I'm talking about like dealing with injuries. If you're used to dealing with somebody that's crippled all the time, you forget where you're going.
Yes.
It happens to all of us. And then you just keep modifying the work and modifying the work and modifying the work and forgetting that you're trying to get to Joe's mat.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Kathy and Sanjay, thank you so much for joining us. I want to be mindful of time. I know we're nearing the end. Is there anything that you would like to say as we finally kind of wrap things up? Anything else? Sanjay, would you like to share anything else?
No. Well, I think we've said it all. Very good.
Okay, Kathy, anything you'd like to add before we're through?
No, just thank you so much for hosting this. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for participating. I love seeing you guys again. It's great.
Lovely being here.
Thank you.
We do plan on doing more books, just so you know. We do plan on doing more books
good.
That the author is not available, but that are interesting like this about Pilates. And so check out our list that's coming up. I think we posted the next 2 books up already.
Awesome.
But if you guys have suggestions for books, please let us know as well. We love your feedback.
The next, moving forward, our book clubs will probably be, we picked dates and times on Sundays, assuming that things don't change with the dates that we pick. So Sundays, depending on your time zone, will be 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and then you can figure from there. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. And you can watch this on the replay once it's up. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next book club, which will be in March. Okay.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Good to see you all.
Be well.